And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson. You see those sirens in your feed. You know exactly what that means. It is an emergency podcast, and it is on September the 11th. Danny, the last time that we had an emergency podcast this early in the season, it was for USC parting ways with Clay Helton last year. And it was Clay Helton who plays an integral role in this announcement today as Nebraska Athletic Director Trev Alberts made an announcement that he has met with Scott Frost and decided that they will go in a new direction for their head football coach. There's a lot to get to here. Number one, we have discussed often about this buyout that drops on October 1st, which means that it is a $15 million buyout, not a $7.5 million buyout. So how antsy was Nebraska? $7.5 million worth of antsy. Number two, where Nebraska goes from here, what kind of job this is. Obviously we're surprised. We weren't planning on this. Like eventually, sure. But what do you make of Nebraska going with the early trigger after a 1-2 start? Again, Nebraska losing to Georgia Southern on Saturday night.
So we get the text, right, in our group chat, and it's from Tom, and it said Scott Frost fired. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't Adam Schnefter or one of those fake accounts that would be trolling Nebraska? And he was like, for sure. I was like, oh boy. It does feel like sometimes it's just so obvious. And I have been a defender. We were talking about this right before we came on air. I'll always kind of lean on the more lenient, like, let's take a more rational approach. Let's let time play out. Let's see if you can play your way out of a funk, or, it's early in the season. Maybe you can regroup. And even after they lost to Northwestern, that was my philosophy was, hey, let's not panic. But then sometimes it's just painfully obvious that you need to just rip the Band-Aid off. And that's going to be an expensive Band-Aid, like you talked about. And I wonder, do you think Scott Frost, I wonder if there was a negotiation that took place? I don't know. Coach's agents, Scott Frost probably just talk to my agent about it. But that is an expensive Band-Aid to rip off if they did. They already had him take the pay cut. But they lost to Georgia Southern at home, who was coached by Clay Helton, who, as you mentioned, just got let go a year ago from USC. It's just a confluence of events that just looks awful, because even after the Northwestern game, my mentality was like, maybe Northwestern's good. And then Northwestern gets beat to Duke the same day that you get beat to Georgia Southern. It looks like it's just writing on the wall.
Well, those things have to be tied together. That if you are Trev Alberts, that you're looking at what Northwestern is, you also get this result at home in this spot where your athletic department, on top of this other money, paid $1.5 million to Georgia Southern to lose, for them to come in and for them to beat you. Mickey Joseph is going to be taking over as the interim head coach. This is tenure for Scott Frost that honestly was very surprising. Our friend Barton Simmons was texting this morning. He said, one of the biggest, we were just reminiscing about how when he was at UCF, we thought it was a surefire thing. Mm-hmm. And that the idea of him going to Nebraska, that he could be the one that was going to lead this program back to the kind of heights that the Cornhuskers wanted after things went so poorly in that sort of those post-Bo Pelini years. But this is a program that under Frost's leadership are 5-22 in one-score games. And bringing him back was a little bit of a gamble, but then he took a little bit of a gamble on bringing in 22 transfers to this team. Like you can give better perspective on this than me, but if you're already dealing with a locker room that might have doubt in the head coach, isn't it even tougher when almost 24 of them just showed up right now? Like, that's why I think this was so fragile, where you didn't want to have that whole locker room go ahead and check out, because they hadn't even put in all of the sweat equity that you would have had over recruiting class over recruiting class over recruiting class behind the scenes.
Yeah, players, they're definitely impacted by things that take place. I think it's the turnover, the new players that show up, and it's the new coaches, on the staff. He fired 4 assistants, right, last year as part of the massive overhaul. Let's see. And he brings in Whipple from Pitt, and you're trying to have this new look offense. I think this is a theme we're going to see too. We saw all those upsets over the weekend. And I think the transfer portal might be doing something that could be good in the long run. It is, and not in the way we thought. We thought, oh, the rich are getting richer, which it does feel like some of the schools are. But I also think the turnaround expectation of, oh, we got all these players. This is new roster. We're gonna be better all of a sudden. It takes time to develop continuity and teamwork and togetherness and cohesion with an offense and a defense. That I think this might actually allow opportunity for teams that are soundly coached, that maybe don't have a roster churn and are just really good at executing their system and on offense and defense. And they're going to see more upsets like we saw yesterday with teams that are better taught, more experienced, and have played a lot of football together, as opposed to a collection of hired assassins, for a better word. But that's what the transfer portal is. That's what Scott Frost was trying to do. Bring me in guys who are going to win right away. And I think it's challenging to do that.
Do you think that, what about the whole one score game is like, cause there's a cold blooded numbers approach to this. That's saying like, you can't imagine that you would get this unlucky time and time again. Or do you think that it is fair to hold this and set it at the feet of Scott Frost, where there is something about the in-game coaching, the pre-game preparation. There is something about the way that these teams are being set up to succeed or fail that is leading to them not making the right decisions in tight situations. Is this being unlucky, or do you think that is an accurate reflection of a shortcoming of Frost and his time with Nebraska?
It's a combination of both, right? The players have to make the plays, but the coaches have to put them in position to make those plays. And whether it's just untimely turnovers, whether it's, the onside kick, which we talked about, I didn't think it was that. I knew what he was trying to do was be aggressive and let's go for the jugular and let's take control of the game. That probably, and we said this after, that might be the decision that got him fired. And sure enough, sitting here a couple weeks later, maybe that was it. I think it had way more to do with losing to Georgia Southern. But you don't have that many games and it just be luck. Like it's coaching, it's players feeling too stressed or too scared or unable to close. And it really is a hard thing to do. And like Florida State's a good example. Mike Norvell, they could have lost that game the other night, but they found a way and they got lucky and it hit and now it's a totally different complexion. And now you feel like, okay, we might have gotten over that hump. And for Nebraska, they never had that bounce go their way. And then they start to accumulate, and it's a combination of all of it.
It's tough. You mentioned earlier about the expense. Like, what is Scott Frost saying? He's probably saying, talk to my agent. If it wasn't Scott Frost at Nebraska, I might have argued that he was tanking it for the extra $7.5 million. Right. Just go ahead and just run this thing into the ground. But I could be wrong, but I truly believe that he cares too much about that football program to intentionally drive it into the ground. And he's probably as beat up about this as anyone else, which I say in response to your earlier comment, there could easily be a negotiated buyout that is not 15, but might be more than 7.5, just to move on and just clear the air so that he doesn't have to go into that Nebraska game, with all this hanging over it.
Or it shows you, the Ed Ogeron sound. When Ed O's talking about laughing like, hey, they said they were going to pay me $17 million. It shows you the irrational. There's no fiscal responsibility in college football. Like, you're going to fire him. You want to get rid of him. We don't, what's $7.5 million? This is ugly. We're losing ticket. We'll see if the sea of red, if they maintain the sellout streak. There's a lot that goes behind this. So maybe it was just, hey, we can talk about a buyout, we can talk about a negotiation, but we're making this decision no matter what. But I don't think a lot of coaches would have done what Frost did either and taken the pay cut and fired coaches. Some coaches would have said, no, I'm not, and then give me my buyout now. And if you want to fire me, fire me. I'm not playing for less. And I do think he wanted to do it. It was interesting, Chip, because when I was covering Scott Frost, I called one of his games at UCF against Maryland. And I'll never forget, we were in a meeting and he was starting to get some buzz. I think they were 4-0 and they'd come off a nice season. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, are you ready for the next jump? To go to UCF, to a Nebraska. And he said to me, he's like, man, he goes, I wasn't ready for this job. He's like, I'll figure it out. And now that I go back and look on that, I'm like, it was very refreshingly honest, Maybe it was too
But
soon.
also,
Maybe it was like maybe he did just follow into a great situation at UCF, great assistants, great players, and it just all clicked. And then when you talk about building a program that is down in the dumps, and it takes more than just because you played there and you can get some recruits. It takes a lot, and I think it shows you how hard it is to turn these programs around. It's not easy.
great point there. I mean, he had only had 2 years of being a head coach at all. And it was he goes, I think UCF was 0-12 before he got there. He gets them to a bowl game in year 1. They go 13-0 in year 2. His coaching career was an absolute rocket ship. And Nebraska, A, being in the Big Ten, B, like the game itself, I mean, you just can't figure that out on the fly. I mean, he didn't even have the comments after the Northwestern game. It's where we joked that maybe he was throwing Mark Whipple under the bus, but he was saying, like, listen, we got to be better in this league, as if he was almost saying, like, this is tough. We are getting our asses handed to us on the coaching front right now. Coaching in the Big Ten is difficult. He finishes with a 10-26 record in Big Ten play. The Cornhuskers never won more than 3 games in conference play. They never finished higher than 5th placed in the SEC West. And again, 16-31 across his 4 seasons and 3 games as Scott Frost is out as Nebraska's head coach, which of course leads us to the next part. This is where
this
the
is
real
fun in the chat too. I don't know if you've seen the chat, because there are some names, and there are 2 really obvious big names that are out there. I've seen a lot of Urban Meyer.
Yep.
And I'm seeing a lot of Bob Stoops. Those are the 2 big ones I'm seeing in the chat. And then it becomes like we go back to the question. We even had this on the pod about Urban Meyer. Would he go to Nebraska? I think it was a mailbag question. Like, would he take that job? I don't think he would right now. I think he kind of wants to see what will happen. I think he's going to take this whole year to do the Big Noon show. And I at the time, I think you and I were in agreement. I think it was, I don't think he's going to take this, right? Did you think he would take it? I don't think he thinks this job is beneath him. And I don't know if Urban Meyer, and this goes to how hard this job is. Urban is at a stature in his legacy where I think he feels like, I can hold out for a job that is a winner, that I step in and you can win. Texas, USC, when he went to Florida, Ohio State, like the jobs he did take and the jobs he would consider are programs that are pretty quick turnarounds. That's why I don't know if Urban's like, man, at my point, I'm not going to take that job. It's too hard. It's too big of a project for me to take on that might be too much risk after what just happened to me in Jacksonville.
It's the perfect coaching search, because you've got the top layer of the Urban Meyer and Bob Stoops. And then you've got the second layer, which is Nebraska fans would love it and call it a home run. And it is debatable as to whether these coaches would leave their current situation to go take the Nebraska job, understanding all that's going on right there. Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, Matt Campbell at Iowa State. I mean, who else would be on that list where I think Nebraska fans would be thrilled about it?
I don't know. See, here's what happens. And this happened to Tennessee a lot remember the Gruden watch, and they'd throw out these names that were just
the USC coaching search had James Franklin hired for like 3 weeks in the middle of October.
Right.
Then he got a $90 million deal with Penn State.
Right. And USC got their guy. Tennessee did not. And Heupel's good. I mean, Heupel might be the right guy in the long run, but I remember, Tennessee fans weren't exactly doing jumping jacks. There were a lot of other names I think they would have rather had. So I don't know if Nebraska, even if they pinpoint their guy, I don't know if their guy, dream job, is going to take it. Because I think, Matt Campbell would be great. Is he going to take it? I think he probably leaves Iowa State. I don't know if Fickell would leave for Nebraska. He's got a great setup now. They're going to the Big 12. You got access to the playoffs. You're already making pretty good money. He might parlay it into a raise, but I don't think he leaves to take that job. Do you? I mean, I think Cincinnati's probably a better job right now than Nebraska, which is crazy to even say out loud, but they've already been to the playoffs and they're going to have easier access to the playoffs.
I think that Nebraska has more money, resources, booster support, sort of like infrastructure built up that you could weaponize if that's something that attracts you. I don't think that tracks Luke Fickell. And that is
No.
like, I don't have a personal relationship with him, but based on the way he carries himself, what he said about other jobs, I kind of have penciled him in as Ohio State, Notre Dame, or staying at Cincinnati. And then
Yep.
it's like maybe if there's another elite job, but he's already had opportunities to take jobs that were Power 5 before Cincinnati got announced as being a future member of the Big 12. Luke Fickell's who you go to first. If I'm Trev Alberts, I go to Luke Fickell first.
Mhm.
Hey, does this interest you? Matt Campbell, I think, would be another great opportunity. That might be a good move for Matt Campbell. Just to like have you maxed out at Iowa State. Is this a good opportunity to finally make a jump to challenge yourself again? I mean, it wasn't like he started on the Iowa State staff and was, born and bred there. This is from Ohio, right? He came in from Toledo. Like this, he's got a little bit of a coaching background to him that suggests he might be willing to entertain the challenge of taking on Nebraska and trying to do what Scott Frost was not able to do. But there's an NFL coach, and I don't know what the score is right now in Bank of America Stadium, but I watched about a quarter of the Panthers and the Browns before we got the text.
I think that would be a great hire.
I think I wonder if Matt Rhule already knew it. He's fine. He's actually doesn't have a play call sheet in front of him. He's got his resume. He's sort of putting it together right now. I think that there's also. Go ahead.
I think he'd be a slam dunk hire. And I've worked with him a lot, covered him a few times. And when he went to Carolina, I just felt like he was more of a college coach, almost like some coaches' personalities. And I think even Carolina fans, right when he was hired, they were like, whoa, what type of energy is this? We haven't seen this in a long time. There's a little bit, it just feels collegial. And I know, he had NFL history and he was with the Giants staff, but what he did at Baylor was super impressive. He turned that thing around quick. I covered his first game at Baylor and they lost to Liberty. I think it was one of the bigger upsets of the day. And I knew I think it's going to be a similar type of rebuild. That's why I do think Matt Campbell would be an outstanding. Matt Campbell turned down a lot of money in the NFL. I think he realized I'm not an NFL coach, but I think you bring up a great point about maybe, maxing out what you could do at Iowa State. And I think that type of personality, I do think is what you need to win there. A little bit of the chip on the shoulder has to come back to the Nebraska fans and the players themselves. Like you can't just walk in the door and say, hey, we're Nebraska.
So what are the chances that Mickey Joseph, now the interim coach for Nebraska, can parlay this thing into getting the job?
At Ogeron or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be that good. I don't know if he's going to parlay it into a national championship.
No, not that good. I mean, we are talking about Coach O's former assistant head coach, somebody who was on that LSU staff and somebody who's been a long time assistant. And if he can take this like team of mercenaries and make a bowl game, then you could find listen.
I don't think 6-6 is gonna do. Like if they rattled off like 7 wins in a row, then maybe I think you could see it. But I think Nebraska, I think Trev Alberts is gonna want to find somebody you can sell and keep the positivity and keep the money flowing from your boosters and NIL programs that you have set up. And I don't know. It'd be fascinating to see. I don't think that this is why I always am not a fan of firing midseason. I'm like, well, what are you going to get now? Like, what do you think your players are doing? A lot of those players came in there as these hired guns. Like, they're not loyal to Nebraska. They're in there to try to, everybody thinks they're going to go to the NFL. That's what they're probably thinking is, oh, I'm going to get to play at Nebraska. I'm going to parlay this. Now you make that change. Now I wonder what the mindset of that locker room is. Now it can wake you up. And if there's a coach say, holy crap, like we can't make any more mistakes. We better dial in. But the majority of the time, USC last year is a pretty good example. Their season went an absolute tank after they fired Clay Helton. I do think the players liked Scott Frost, so it's going to be a rude wake-up call for him.
So there's two. Urban Meyer mentioned a lot, but there's actually 3 other names in broadcasting right now who, because they are in broadcasting, would be able to potentially be on board in time to try to save this recruiting class. Because we already talked about the roster in transition, heavy on the transfer portal. You fire Scott Frost right now. I mean, holding this recruiting class together, that's Mickey Joseph's like strongest challenge. And if he's able to do it, at least, earns himself a spot probably on the new coach's staff. Tom Herman, Dan Mullen is out here. He's available.
He did win at Mississippi State. If you're able to win there, I don't know. I wonder if he's at that position. Tom Herman was in CBS Sports Studio the other night.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a booth.
Yeah, in the first week. Yeah, he's doing a good job. Do they fire up? I think Urban Meyer, obviously, they would love it. Stoops, they would love. Somebody suggested Mark Stoops. He's got too good of setup at Kentucky.
Bring back Pelini.
Yeah, bring back Pelini. That'd be a good one. I would love for that to happen. Yeah, this is going to be wild because this is one of those bigger jobs where I think the fan base thinks they can get whatever they want, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, do you know Trev Alberts?
I don't.
I think
I met him like a couple times in passing. I've
got to think that this is one of those coaching searches where, because he's capital T Trev Alberts around there, he actually can do I'm doing this. Right. I'm running. Like, there's not every athletic director, especially at programs like Nebraska, can truly hold off everyone else and say, I'm running this search. And then you get the too many cooks in the kitchen. Then you get your Tennessee situation, your Auburn situation. But I believe that Trev Alberts, and that means that we're probably not going to get, like, we are going to speculate, but I don't think we'll get as much like good, juicy leaks here and there. I think that he gets now to work the search. He gets to own it himself. And then his future as the athletic director at a university
will be tied to this hire.
Will 100% be tied.
Because he also gave Scott Frost another opportunity. Like, he's been very patient with him, which I understand. It's his boy. It's his guy. But that'll be linked to him too. So this feels like the hire that he has to make, that he has to hit, or else his job's on the line.
Chris Peterson, that was the third in the broadcast studio. I liked him. He was
a solid one.
He was on the FS1 desk. I caught him yesterday, and I was like, man, I forgot. I like watching him talk about football.
Didn't he do the whole thing where he's just burnt out, like how much work it takes? Like, that's
Nebraska shouldn't be interested in somebody who says that it's too much work to be out there.
You're going to need somebody who's obsessed. And that's the thing. When you get some of these coaches, they get a taste of the TV life. It's pretty nice. Can't lose a game. They make pretty good money. Like, they got to really think hard and long about, do I want to get back in this mess? But then there are some coaches like Jim Morrill. He hated, I'll do whatever it takes, and goes back to UConn,
Gary Patterson.
Ooh. I actually like that.
One of the stars of the weekend, coming.
Yeah.
Stock is on the rise.
Take it now. He should take it right now. He should be calling. He should leave now. How about his tweet? Did you see his tweet?
The "we, not me." The credit goes to everybody. Like,
but I thought that was pretty balls. I mean, he sounded like, thanks for everybody for reaching out. Like, you won the game. Like, I'm like, you guys still lost. And he's like, thanks for all the credit, but it doesn't go to me. And I'm like, you guys still lost. I get it was a great defensive performance, but I don't know. I thought it was odd. I thought it was odd timing.
That is a very, very good point. I didn't think about it like, that's something a lot of people are saying, that I'm this.
Right.
Are you sure? No, we gave you credit. The defensive line looked good, but you didn't win.
Yeah, but now we're ready to give him Nebraska's head job. So maybe it was the best thing he did was send a tweet.
Actually, you know what? That's the good, strong takeaway here. Hey, Gary Patterson, just take the job now. Stock's never going to be higher. Yep. Quinn Ewers is out 4 to 6 weeks. The Texas season's it's gonna be a little bit shaky from time to time. You just cash out while you're on top, Coach Gary Patterson, and go ahead and just head on to Lincoln and take that Nebraska job. Anything else on this before we get out of here?
Nah. Well, it's gonna be. There are gonna be some rumors flying on this one, though.
Deion.
Yeah. Oh,
Deion
I got a text from somebody. Deion to Auburn. Just putting it out there. Just floating it. We'll see what happens. Just something to tuck away back in the memory banks.
Hey, we'll clip it.
That's right. September 11th, 223.
Yeah,
called it.
The Cover 3 podcast, the archives never lie. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. We will be back with more on this and, of course, our full Monday upon further review, some reaction to the new college football rankings, AP versus coaches, more notes from the weekend that was, and, of course, more reaction on Nebraska firing Scott Frost. Danny, thank you very much.
You got it. Here we go. NFL Red Zone.